That evening, I found a place to stay. It was a small riad tucked behind a corner I hadn't meant to turn, half hidden behind a wall of flowering vines and a faded wooden sign painted in delicate script. I rang the brass bell hanging by the door, and after a moment, it creaked open. The woman who answered wore a loose dress the color of sand. Her eyes were kind but unreadable, like she'd seen many versions of lost travelers before. She didn't ask where I came from or how long I was staying. She simply said, "Come in," and motioned with her hand. Inside was a different kind of quiet. Not empty, just soft. The sound of running water drifted in from a small courtyard fountain. Blue tiles cooled the air under my feet. A single window let in the last golden light of the day. There were no frills, no marble, no polished show. Just walls that had stood for decades, maybe longer. They seemed to hum with the memory of calm. My room was up a narrow staircase, a wooden door with iron hinges, the bed covered in crisp white sheets, and a small window that looked down into the courtyard below. On the table beside the bed sat a ceramic dish of dried herbs. Lavender, I think. I placed my backpack gently on the floor and sat down. It was the first time in weeks I felt the absence of sound as something kind. I didn't shower right away. I didn't unpack. I lay back on the bed fully clothed, let the ceiling fan whirl overhead, and closed my eyes. I hadn't realized how heavy I had been holding my body, like every part of me was bracing for something. But here, finally, I had let go. When I woke, the sky outside had shifted to a cool indigo. The woman from the front desk had left a note on my door. Just 2 words in English. "Dinner ready." I followed the scent. Downstairs in the courtyard, 2 low tables had been set with clay plates and silver cups. There were only 3 of us. The owner, a middle-aged couple from Marseille, and me. No music, no clatter. Just candlelight, a jug of water with mint leaves, and steam rising from a tagine that smelled like saffron and cinnamon. I ate slowly. The food was simple. Lamb with prunes, bread still warm from the oven, carrots dusted with cumin. But it was made with care. Every bite grounded me. Every sip of tea reminded me that my body still had its rhythms, even if my mind didn't trust them yet. The couple made quiet conversation in French. I nodded along when I could understand, smiled politely when I couldn't. It didn't matter. We weren't there to be fascinating. We were there to be present. After dinner, I climbed to the rooftop. Chefchaouen at night doesn't glow, it glimmers. Lanterns flicker behind curtains. Moonlight rests on blue rooftops like silk. The town whispers rather than sleeps. I stood at the edge of the terrace and looked out toward the mountains, their silhouettes dark against the sky. For a long time, I said nothing. I just stood there, letting the air move through my shirt, letting the quiet fill my ears. And slowly, something inside me softened. Grief hadn't left me. It was still there, tucked into the corners of my chest like smoke that hadn't cleared. But here, it wasn't suffocating. It wasn't demanding. It just sat beside me, as if even it too had finally grown tired of the noise. In that moment, I didn't feel healed, but I felt honest. And for the first time in a while, honest was enough. I sat on the rooftop bench, wrapped myself in a thin blanket the riad kept folded in a basket, and watched the stars come out one by one. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't wishing for a sign or a breakthrough. I was just breathing. And sometimes, that's the beginning of everything. I slept deeply that night, the kind of sleep that doesn't come from exhaustion, but from surrender. There were no alarms, no city noise, just the wind slipping through the shutters and the faint clink of ceramic as someone somewhere below prepared morning tea. I woke to soft morning light stretching across the white walls of my room, casting shadows through the lattice of the window. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the urge to check the time. I let the morning take me slowly. Downstairs, the riad's small courtyard smelled of mint and fresh bread. A pot of tea waited on the table, along with olive oil, apricot jam, and cobs. Flat Moroccan bread still warm from the oven. The owner had already left out a plate and a small note written in graceful French. "Take your time. The day is yours." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. The day is yours. In my normal life, a day was always something to spend or survive or schedule. Here, it was something to hold gently. I wrapped a scarf around my shoulders and stepped outside. The town was quieter in the morning. Blue walls glowed gently in the rising sun, and the streets were mostly empty, just a few shopkeepers sweeping their doorways or opening wooden shutters with sleepy hands. Cats stretched across stairways like they'd lived here for centuries. I passed a boy delivering bread in a woven basket tied to his bicycle and nodded at a woman arranging oranges in front of her door. She smiled but didn't speak. She didn't need to. As I wandered, I noticed how the color blue changed with the light. In the shade, it looked cool and moody, almost gray. In the sun, it blazed like sapphire. Some buildings were painted evenly, others streaked and faded, like brushstrokes from an unfinished dream. Every shade told a different story of rain of sun of time. The color became something I didn't expect, comforting, as if the whole town had been wrapped in calm on purpose to hold people like me who didn't know what they were searching for. I stopped in front of a small art shop tucked between two narrow alleys. Inside, a man was arranging postcards on a table. He looked to be in his 60s, with a thin frame and steady hands. When I entered, he greeted me with a quiet bonjour and returned to his work. The walls were filled with watercolors of the town, rooftops, staircases, vases full of flowers. None of them were loud. None tried to impress. They simply showed what was already there, seen with patient eyes. We talked for a while, slowly, haltingly, me with broken French and him with broken English. When I asked how long he'd lived here, he smiled gently and said, "Always." I asked him why the town was painted blue. He paused. "Some say it keeps the mosquitoes away," he began, then shrugged. "Others say it brings people peace." He gestured toward a painting of a narrow stairway lined with flower pots and added, "But I think, maybe it's just beautiful, and sometimes beautiful is enough." I bought a small watercolor. No frame, just the painting rolled and tied with string. I didn't need it to decorate my home. I needed it to remind me that beauty doesn't need a reason. Back outside, the streets had begun to fill, but not loudly. Everything in Chefchaouen moved like breath. Even the conversation sounded softer, like the mountains absorbed sharpness and left only warmth. I wandered until I reached the top of a long stairway, and there I sat, not to rest, not to plan, just to sit. And as I looked down over the rooftops, over the pale blue walls stretching toward the distant hills, I thought of how far I'd come, not in distance, but in spirit. I hadn't healed. I hadn't found myself. But I had finally stopped running. I had let the silence speak. And in doing so, I had remembered something that loss had made me forget. That it's okay to feel broken. That it's okay to be quiet. And that some places don't ask you to fix anything. They just ask you to be.